Moving into our first topic for this morning, be Cambodia's investment potential, outdated perceptions and missed opportunities. I'm joined by Mr. Michael Tan, Aquarii's founding partner and CEO, who has over 20 years of experience in Asia. Prior to establishing Aquarii, he was a Singapore ambassador to Cambodia from 2016 to 2020, where he took an active role to promote trade, collaboration, cross-border business partnerships and knowledge sharing between the two countries. Fantastic to have you here, Michael.
Good to be here.
So firstly, can you please tell us a little bit more about your new role in the business world?
Well, in my current capacity, I'm the CEO of Aquarii BD Cambodia, which was established towards the end of last year to help connect businesses, create opportunities, and grow partnerships for international businesses and investors that are interested in the Cambodian market. And how we do so is through a twin offering of services. One is the free access online business platform that was launched earlier this year, where businesses and investors can find most of the information that they need about the Cambodian market. Whereas if they were to look for the same information at other sources, it could be piecemeal, incomplete, or even outdated. This platform is complemented by our advisory and consultancy service, which is positioned to help businesses and investors navigate the local landscape, open doors to new connections, even to the extent of helping them to identify, assess, and curate suitable local partners for their investment projects. Because we also help to strategize their business plans and approaches. Now, in the performance of all these services, we leverage on the network of contacts, resource persons, and industry experts that have built up over the past 6 years of my time in Cambodia, 4.5 of which was when I was the Singapore ambassador to the kingdom. Maybe I should add that one other value proposition in our market insights is that we take into account our reading and interpretation of domestic political developments, as well as the effects of geopolitical forces on Cambodia, because ultimately they can have an impact on the host government's national policy, posture, and priorities, which in turn can be translated into challenges and opportunities for the larger business and investment community here.
No, I think it's fantastic what's been created here. Now, I guess referring back to Cambodia, pre-COVID has been recording an average annual growth of more than 7% for almost 20 years. Yet we get the sense that many businesses and investors seem to prefer neighboring countries such as Myanmar or Vietnam, for example. Why do you think this has been the case?
Okay, that's a very good question. The short answer would be that it's a confluence of multiple factors and circumstances, and therefore extremely difficult to explain in such a short time that we have this morning. I would say that for participants in the webinar, if you're interested in the longer and more complete version, I'll be more than happy to have a candid chat over drinks when you next visit the kingdom. But for the purpose of this webinar, I think it will suffice to say that Cambodia has been plagued by a very long period of entrenched and sustained negative perception and outdated perspective. It's almost as if many of our minds have been conditioned to reject, discount, or disbelieve any positive news or development concerning the kingdom. I remember when I first assumed my duty in 2016, some of my contacts, whether Cambodian, Singaporean, or any other nationality, right, they would joke that if there's a positive news or development about the kingdom, the international media will show disinterest. But one negative incident and event, and they will seize on it and it will spread very quickly on the social media and international media circuit. But thankfully, I think for Cambodia Investment Review, you've been putting out very balanced and factual reporting on the business and investment front. So I think that's been very helpful. For example, for the participants in our webinar, I think many of you already have done your research about Cambodia. And I think it's far easier to find negative news about Cambodia than positive ones. Not that there are no positive news, right? For example, how many are aware that back in 2015 and 2016, before the UN Sustainable Development Goals was introduced, Cambodia was held as a sterling example in their achievement and accomplishment for the Millennium Development Goals? How many were aware that the poverty rate for Cambodia was northwards of 47% in 2007? But within 7 short years, by 2014, the poverty rate was reduced to 30.5%, which was comparable, if not lower, than the poverty rate in the US and the EU. And most recently, there's a belated acknowledgement and recognition that Cambodia has done exceptionally well in their fight against the COVID pandemic in terms of border control, vaccination of the population, making sure that the vaccine is available to both foreigners and Cambodians without discrimination. Their procurement and stockpiling program for vaccines for the booster shots, as well as the easing of their border controls, lifting of quarantine measures to reopen their economy. So in fact, they were the first in the region to do so, and other countries started to follow suit. But at the onset, this was not the international opinion. International opinion about Cambodia then was skepticism, cynicism, and a lot of suspicion. Right? But belatedly, when they realized that actually the situation here is really under control, then there's a turnaround of opinion. Now, having said that, I do not mean that there's no dysfunction and that there are no operational difficulties or challenges when you invest or do business here. Of course there are, right? Suffice to say that they are not dissimilar to that you may encounter in other emerging economies. But the point that I'm trying to make is that given how digitally connected we are today, why is it that international businesses and investors, especially from Singapore and other nearby countries, why do they continue to overlook Cambodia as an investment and business destination? I think up to this day, a couple of weeks ago when I was back in Singapore, I spoke to some of the Singapore businessmen, a few members from SCCI as well. Many of them are still not aware that businesses here can be 100% foreign owned. You don't need local partners if you do not wish to, unlike certain countries in the region. Cambodia is a dollarized economy, which means that exchange rate risks can be mitigated, or at least it's predictable. Remittance of dividends or profits is easily done. There's no capital gains tax. And there are numerous other incentives for investments and projects, which our other speakers will touch on. So hopefully through this webinar that we are co-organizing, we can create greater awareness that Cambodia has indeed been overlooked as a business and investment destination. And I hope that more out there whose perception and perspective continue to be conditioned or shaped by certain opinions and publications out there will want to visit the kingdom and see for themselves the potential and opportunities that Cambodia and its people can offer.
I think it's fantastic. I think that's what hopefully today we can provide a bit more clarity around some of these topics. Cambodia was one of the first, basically around the world, or certainly the region, to reopen its borders and ease travel restrictions. Now, the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank are estimating around 3 to 4% GDP growth this year, but with some continuing global supply chain concerns, as well as some geopolitical issues going on around the world. How do you think Cambodia's economy is going to be faring over the next coming years?
Well, one quick correction is that recent figures indicate that Cambodia's economy is going to grow by 5%. Okay, longer 3 to 4. Yeah. I think no country in the world will be spared from the storm, the economic storm that's looming or is really upon us, right? The disruption in supply chain and logistics, inflationary pressures, rising protectionism, and so on and so forth. But I think it's important for us to refocus on what are the encouraging and favorable factors in terms of Cambodia's longer-term growth trajectory. For economy of time, let me just quickly highlight several of these indicators to give you an idea. More than 70% of the Cambodian population are under the age of 35 years old, which is a tremendous growth factor if anyone is looking at an emerging market or a developing country. Pre-COVID, there's been a growing middle class, and with the resumption of economic activities, that trend looks set to continue. Just because there are many who continue to discount or disbelieve that Cambodia has pro-investment and pro-business national policies, or they continue to overlook it does not diminish or negate the fact that it continues to be. In fact, when they were contemplating reopening their economy, they were already proposing and have implemented additional measures and incentives for foreign investments and businesses to be set up here. Again, I think our speakers will be touching on some of these points later, but there are two other points I would like to quickly highlight. Cambodia also enjoys various tariff exemption schemes for its exports. So it's quickly becoming a manufacturing hub before COVID, and the government will do whatever it can to make sure that that status can be restored. It enjoys a tariff exemption scheme for exports to the EU under the Everything But Arms scheme, to the US under the GSP, to South Korea under the Cambodia-South Korea FTA, to China under a very comprehensive benefits of the Cambodia-China FTA, and soon you have the RCEP. But there are also other free trade agreements that Cambodia is negotiating or in discussion with other countries. The most important criterion that I see in my conclusion for this segment, right? Other than the potential and opportunities, what's most important for businesses and investors to look at when they are considering whether to invest or establish a business in an emerging economy or developing country, it must be the political stability. The greatest testament or biggest testament that I can give you is myself. I left a very stable career to come back to Cambodia to set up my own business. The potential and opportunities were very enticing, but it is not because of my assessment that Cambodia will be politically stable for at least the next 10 years and beyond. I would not have taken that risk. So political stability is the main criterion, I think, for consideration for investment in the kingdom. And potential and opportunities that we see, the icing on the cake.
No, I think that's 100% correct. There'd be nothing more when now someone's taken the role, you'll come here and set it up. I think that really is proof of what you obviously do believe in the country's opportunities. I think we'll put that topic today. So moving into discussing our third topic, our second topic coming in. One sec. Oh, I was going to say, before I do let you go, can I just get some of your brief points on what do you believe the investment and business opportunities in Cambodia could be?
Well, with the COVID pandemic that the world has gone through, right? What is the topmost concern for most governments, businesses, and consumers? Food security. And so when you look at Cambodia, given the rich, fertile land that it has, agriculture will be a tremendous growth sector. In fact, many experts from various countries have already come to Cambodia to do the soil test before COVID, and they have concluded that Cambodia does have one of the world's most fertile soil. It's just a matter of matching which are the cash crops or agricultural products that are suitable for a particular region. And because Cambodia is an emerging market, developing country, real estate development, logistics and supply chain services in terms of healthcare, education, fintech, will continue to be growth areas. This is augmented by the fact that it has a very youthful profile. Internet penetration is extremely high. Lastly, of course, as I mentioned, because of the tariff exemption scheme that they enjoy for their various exports to other countries, manufacturing and production is also another area that the investors and businesses should certainly consider.
Fantastic. I think that's been a very great way to start the webinar today, and hopefully our attendees get a little bit more insight of what we'd like to be discussing. So thank you so much, Michael.